This man is almost 77 years old, and he's basically a real-life superhero. He has survived a plane crash, been put in a coma on purpose by doctors, and his heart has literally stopped beating. But the biggest tragedy of Ric Flair isn't his broken bones or the pacemaker in his chest. It's that the man who was once the definition of winning is now trapped. He's a prisoner of the exact character that made him a megastar, and he can't escape. This is the insane story of how the Nature Boy character is destroying the actual man. To see how big of a tragedy this is, you have to understand how big of a legend he was. In wrestling, you have famous people, and then you have Ric Flair. For millions of people, he wasn't just some wrestler. He was the ultimate life goal. In the crazy 1980s, Flair was the living embodiment of extreme success, and he lived his character for real more than anyone ever. The Nature Boy was the perfect mix of being the best and telling everyone about it. He was the guy with the Rolex, the limousine, the private jet, and he would literally steal kisses from women on camera. His uniform wasn't just wrestling gear, it was $1,000 robes that were more insane than the last. And his became a sound people use all over the world when they win at something. And in the ring, he was an absolute genius. They called him the 60-minute man because he could have an amazing match with literally anyone. He was also called the dirtiest player in the game because he was a master of cheating to win, making the entire crowd hate him until they had to respect how good he was. He won the World Championship a record 16 times. That number made him the final boss of wrestling. He had a famous saying,
"To be the man, you gotta beat the man," and I'm saying, woo!
And for decades, nobody could. The problem is, being the man came at a cost, and the real person, Richard Fleer, would spend his entire life paying it back. The Nature Boy persona was never supposed to end when the show was over. It was a 24/7 performance. The character was all about spending insane amounts of money, so the man had to do it too. The limos weren't rented for the show. He drove them every single day. The champagne wasn't just a prop, it was flowing all the time. For a while, his massive paychecks could actually cover the spending, but you can only spend a fortune for so long, and the Nature Boy wanted to spend forever. This is where everything started to go wrong. The lifestyle that made him a celebrity became an anchor that pulled him into an ocean of financial disaster. He was losing insane amounts of money, living way bigger than even a rich person could. The line between Ric Flair the wrestler and Richard Flair the normal guy was completely gone, and this led to some unbelievable real-life problems. He ended up with a crazy amount of debt, and the IRS became a tougher enemy than anyone he ever wrestled. The government took his earnings to pay off his taxes, which made his already chaotic life 1,000 times more stressful. He wasn't wrestling to be the best anymore, he was wrestling just to survive. This desperation for money is why he made some of his most shocking career moves. He left a top company, WCW, and jumped to their biggest rival, the WWF, because of money. Years later, after he had the perfect retirement in WWE, he went to wrestle in a smaller company called TNA, which everyone saw as a sad move to make a quick buck. He even called his time there a disaster, all because he desperately needed a paycheck to handle his giant debts and expensive divorces. The guy who was supposed to be the best was actually completely broke. Long before he ran out of money, Ric Flair's body paid the ultimate price. On October 4th, 1975, a plane carrying Flair and other wrestlers crashed. The pilot died, and the wrestlers were horribly injured. Flair broke his back in 3 different places. Doctors told him he would never, ever wrestle again. For anyone else, that would be the end of the story, but not for Ric Flair. After insane physical therapy, he was back in the ring just a few months later. But he couldn't wrestle the same way. The crash forced him to invent a totally new style, which became the Nature Boy character we know today. So in a crazy twist, the crash that almost killed him is what created his legendary character. But it also taught him something dangerous, to completely ignore his body's limits. And ignoring his own health became his thing. Decades of being thrown around, bleeding in matches, and traveling non-stop all started to add up. But the biggest danger came from his lifestyle of partying all night and insane amounts of drinking. In 2017, it all came crashing down. Flair went to the hospital for stomach pain, and it turned into a life-or-death emergency. Years of drinking gave him a blocked bowel, kidney failure, and heart failure. They put him in a medical coma, and doctors gave him only a 20% chance of living. His family was literally called in to say their last goodbyes. And somehow, against all odds, he survived. You would think almost dying would be the ultimate wake-up call. For a little while, it was. Flair stopped drinking and got a pacemaker, but the addiction to hearing the crowd cheer was just too strong. This led to a match called Ric Flair's Last Match in 2022. At 73 years old, with a pacemaker in his chest, he got back in the ring. The match was terrifying to watch. He was so exhausted and weak, and later he revealed the most insane part. He had a heart attack during the match and passed out 3 times. He thought it was just because he was dehydrated. He literally gambled his life for one more moment in the spotlight. Even after that, he won't stop. In 2025, he was diagnosed with skin cancer and needed surgery. More recently, he tore his rotator cuff and had to stop being physical in AEW, where he signed up just to be with his friend Sting for his last match. Even with all these massive red flags, he still talks about having one more match. The plane crash taught him to wrestle through any pain, but it seems like it also taught him to ignore death itself. Maybe the biggest tragedy is the complete disaster the Nature Boy character left behind in his personal life. The wheelin', dealin', kiss-stealin' lifestyle had a horrible impact on his family. He was married and divorced over and over, and each one made his life even more of a mess. Being on the road and partying all the time made having a normal family impossible. He was a hero to the entire world, but was never home to be a dad. This cost him everything, with the death of his youngest son, Reid Flair, in 2013. Reid was a wrestler too, and looked up to his dad more than anyone. Tragically, he copied both the good and the bad parts of his dad's life. Reid fought with addiction for years and died of an accidental overdose when he was only 25. Ric Flair has said he feels an unbelievable amount of guilt because he believes his own lifestyle is what led to his son's problems. As time went on, people started to see the Nature Boy's behavior in a different, much darker way. The worst example of this is the plane ride from hell in 2002. For years, it was just a crazy wrestling story about a wild party on a flight. But when the real details came out in a documentary, the stories turned horrifying. A flight attendant said that Flair, wearing only his open robe, trapped her in the back of the plane and sexually assaulted her, even forcing her to touch him. In response, Flair admitted he was acting inappropriately and exposing himself because he was blackout drunk, but denied he ever forced himself on anyone. In today's world, this incident, which used to be treated like a crazy party story, was now seen for what it was: a story of abuse. For a lot of people, Flair's legacy, once built on being an amazing performer, now had a permanent stain on it. This failure to leave the character behind still follows him. His public appearances are getting more and more out of control. There are stories of him being thrown out of bars for acting aggressive. His social media is a weird mix of him reliving his glory days and starting strange online fights. His promos in AEW were sometimes confusing and weird, like one time when he made an uncomfortable comment about the women he wanted around him. Every single incident just shows an old icon who is desperately trying to be a version of himself that doesn't exist anymore. In the end, the Ric Flair story is a classic tragedy about how fame can destroy you. The Nature Boy character was an absolute masterpiece that gave him everything you could ever want: championships, millions of fans, and a life of unbelievable luxury. But that exact same character turned into a prison he could never escape. The same strength that let him survive a plane crash became the same stubbornness that made him wrestle with a pacemaker. The charisma that made millions of people love him became a mask he could never take off. The lifestyle that made him a legend led to him losing all his money, breaking his family's heart, and shaming himself in public. Today, at 77, Ric Flair is fighting against his own legacy. He's known as possibly the greatest wrestler of all time, but the things he does today often ruin that status. He has survived health scares that would have killed anyone else, but he keeps taking insane risks, like he's addicted to the danger. He is a legend trapped by his own story, a man who flew too close to the sun and has been falling ever since. The tragedy of Ric Flair isn't that his career is over, it's that for him, it can never end. The woo that used to announce the arrival of a king now sounds like a sad, lonely cry from a man who can't tell the difference between himself and the ghost he's chasing. The Nature Boy will live forever, but the tragic reality is that he may have cost Richard Flair everything.